Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Sloan, say hi.
Hey y'all.
This-
We out here.
I wish I could see you clearly instead of just talking into this right now.
It'll be
Um,
this mystery. It'll be a mystery of like my voice and my mannerisms, and you'll get to match them up later when you can run back the recording. So I'll be sure to do
right, it's
some
going to be a whole surprise.
for you.
I'd imagine. I mean, me personally, I'd probably be doing some backflips if I had the space to do it. Having a whole conversation,
I mean, I do have the
doing some
flexibility to do
backflips.
it. I got the space, but not the dexterity. So we'll be saving that for a different podcast.
Oh man. I want to thank you for doing this with me. Oh, I see you. I see you.
How
Awesome,
do I
awesome,
look?
awesome. Nice, lovely, lovely. I
Thank
want to see the lovely face. That needs to be shared with me as well, not just the
you.
rest of the world. Today's so this I wanted to talk with you because I truly enjoy the conversations that we have, and I feel like those types of conversations should definitely be shared with the world because the type of conversations we do have are needed, and they should have happen more often than when they do. And I love your feedback on everything that I say. Honestly, so I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of that. And the conversation. Ooh, I just realized I didn't name the show. This is Transcend Breaking Boundaries. Oh man, the name too. By the way, I'm going to shout out the you helped with the going in between what I was going to decide for the name.
Yes, yes. All right.
you're
Well,
you're both
I'll take whatever credit you can slide me in. It's nice to have my name placed.
got you, got you. Today's conversation, though, it's double marginalization in the LGBTQ2IAQ community.
Yeah.
I want to talk about it because it is I think it's an issue. I remember I saw a post on Instagram, and it was a black trans man who had posted. The question was asked to white transgender people, and the question was asking them, do they think that they are what was the word that was used? I can't think of the specific wording, but pretty much asking, do they feel like they receive the same type of prejudices as people of color and so forth, same discriminations as people of color do and so forth.
Yeah.
And I mean, the comments that was reading, there were mixed comments in there. But before we jump into all of that, tell the world a little bit about yourself as well.
Okay.
Let,
Yeah. Happy
let them know
to.
who
Happy
you are.
to. Give him a small briefing. Happy to. So my name is Nefertari Sloan. I go by my last name, Sloan. My pronouns are they, them, desired. She and her are acceptable. I am a non-binary lesbian who is a sex educator. I've been teaching since 2016. And I also consider myself a LGBTQ activist, public speaker, and youth rights advocate. 100%. So I'm really excited to like bring some of the knowledge that I've gained professionally and personally to this conversation, and also, just infuse a bit of joy because that's one of my favorite things and one of the things that I feel destined to do in this world. So happy to be
You do a
here.
great job of that.
Thank you.
You do a great job of the bits of joy. You do a very
Yeah.
good job of that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loves to have a good time. Anybody who doesn't really just it's very disconnected from themselves. So I feel, usually when I talk about my bios, I say like I love offering people hugs, dancing in grocery aisles, and giving people compliments. If I could get paid to do anything, it would be to dress up like a fairy and give people compliments. I'm really here to say everybody is looking good, inside and
You
out.
you do give great hugs too. You give great hugs. Great
Thank you.
hugs.
Thank you. That's the reference I needed. So if you see me on the street, you already know what to do.
Nice. Um, so I want to ask more so, as an educator, do you see much of a do you see I mean asking the question, do you see a change, I feel like it's sort of redundant question, because I don't I the is there change, not the type of changes that are necessary,
Mhm.
but more so growth from individuals sort of acknowledging that there is double marginalization within the community, and that Black people actually do have to, especially those in the community, have to fight harder than their counterpart. Do you see individuals acknowledging that, in a sense of growth in that area?
Um, I feel like when it comes to acknowledgement, what comes to mind for me is this quote that I heard a while ago that says, like, we are only able to grow to the level that we are able to look at ourselves without running away. And I think that, like, in order to acknowledge something, you have to be aware of it and you have to be willing to accept it as truth. And I personally feel like there are so many layers of privilege that inhibit people from accepting certain truths that, like, it's not necessarily like a problem about whether or not somebody sees it. You know, if you don't see it, that doesn't mean it's not happening. It's the whole, like, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, trees hear each other. You know what I mean? Like, humans don't need to censor themselves in every sensory experience in order for it to be valid. And I think that it's really interesting, even that your topic is about double marginalization, when, like, there are so many dimensions of oppression that exist in the world. You know what I mean? Like, as somebody who's non-binary, I love get on my high horse about there always being more than two. You know, there is not just the singular one side or the other side of the spectrum. And I think that racism and heterosexism and cis sexism are two different forms of oppression. And I think ultimately a person who is experiencing both levels of oppression or all three levels of those oppression is obviously going to have a different lens than somebody who's only experiencing one. So I think that when it comes to, like, lived experience, it's very important for people to, like, not necessarily acknowledge, but, like, be able to validate, you know, what's going on for other people, even if you don't identify with that struggle or if you don't have the consciousness or identity to be able to empathize. You can still sympathize, you can still, you know, use your eyes and, you know, acknowledge that, like, people different from you might live a life that is different from yours. And I think at the basic level, instead of, like, you know, diving into very complex academic conversations about intersectionality, which has become a really big buzz term, you know, the point is everybody's different, and nobody, regardless of what community they might come from or what identity they might align themselves with, is going to have the exact same experience as somebody else. And I think that's another thing that we need to, like, kind of step away from. Black people are not a monolith. White individuals are not a monolith. And I think white supremacy as an idea often gets conflated as white individualism. And I think that that's one of the big reasons why white people have such a hard time owning that they may come from an identity that has historically been extremely violent, been extremely capitalistic, exploitative, aggressive, oppressive, and harmful to other folks. But I think, like, nobody wants to be called racist. Nobody wants to, you know, align themselves with an identity that they don't think is morally okay. But I also heard a comedian a while ago. I don't know what his name is. I can't remember, but credit to him if this blows up. You got a little something racist in your teeth. You know, like, whether or not you want to align with that, it came out your mouth. So I think that it's important for people to just be able to recognize, like, just because you think it's okay or just because you think it's normal doesn't mean that there isn't harm that can be found
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. 100%. And there was what was I listening to? I was listening to another podcast, and they was talking about comedians, and how they addressed racism in their acts and so forth, and how even when they try to avoid talking about it because of the current culture of everything, there's no way to actually avoid it. And back to what you're saying with how white people don't necessarily, they don't want to associate themselves with something that, throughout history has been completely harmful and completely bad.
Yeah.
And what I want to stress, and what I think the important thing is, it's you don't have to associate yourself with that, but understand of where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's necessarily how a difference is going to be made. You know what I'm saying? You don't like you have to you can't separate yourself from it, because there are identities that's been created. Like you're saying, there's more than one identity. You don't have to be into that, but because society has made it so that everything has to be put into a box and into a category, then that that is the identity of what you have. And so if you want to be different from it, you're going to have to do more in order to actually separate yourself from it, because
Yeah.
it's centuries of oppression that you are attached to, and ignoring that is the case is what adds to the problem.
Right. Absolutely.
It-
Absolutely.
it's I mean, I do feel like, so I was sitting here earlier watching the Colin Kaepernick his series on
Mm-hmm.
Netflix,
Yeah.
and I was my body was sort of just like I was getting, because I was looking at what he was going through, and then his adopted parents are white, and I'm just looking through like at how they're responding to the stuff that he's going through, and how they're even treating him through all of it. And I'm just like, man, it irritated the hell out of me to just, because it's like, are you really that naive, or do you want to just continuously sweep it underneath the rug and act like it doesn't happen? And then you got all these people who want to sit here and adopt the black people, people of color and so forth. And it's like, are you having the necessary conversations when you're raising a child that is a minority in America? Are you talking about the certain things that they're going to go through,
Mm-hmm.
and the challenges that they're going to face in life? And I mean, the basis of it was what, 2006? On it. Oh, shoot. Did you hear
Mm-hmm.
that? I don't know why Siri wanted to talk to me now.
You want to join the conversation? Hold on.
Right?
I got. Let me
Siri, you know
I
what?
found.
Let me speak. Let me speak real fast.
One moment. I heard you
Uh,
talking about white people.
right? Let me interject and get my 2 cents into the conversation.
Siri, sit down.
Not
This is not
all
your
white people are
table.
the same. I feel like that's the next thing. Not all white people are the same. And add that. um, one of the questions that I had sent you to think about, and it was a thought that, based off a comment that I had read, and it's for trans men, white trans men, and it is more so just asking your thoughts on it, because it's white, it's old, it's cisgendered white men who rule the world, and you know what I'm saying, like that everything comes from that right there. So for white trans men, do you think that any of them, in a sense, use that privilege that they are able to have to at all make any changes, or to contribute to the LGBT community, especially for some of those who are possibly even stealth, who don't? Because I remember we were having a conversation about something, and it was something, and I was telling you how through me being stealth, I would sort of just take myself away from those conversations that we're talking about trans people, where I should have stood up and said something then. And I'm wondering, do you think white trans men at all use that opportunity to make a difference?
I think it's a complex question, honestly, because I don't think that trans people have a responsibility to speak up about racism any more than a cis person. I think for me, patriarchy plays a big role in things, and it's more about the gender differences and the gendered power dynamic that someone has. I think that, if you are a white person, period, regardless of your gender, you have privilege. And I think that, being a trans person, mind you, I identify as non binary, and I know that there are a lot of debates even within the community about how aligned, trans masculine or trans feminine folks and where non-binary people fit in that. So like I do not purport to speak for folks that are F to M or have carried themselves in a different level of that journey. However, I've seen in many communities the ways that transitioning from being perceived as a woman to being able to navigate male spaces just affords you a level of safety and like privilege to speak up and be taken seriously in a way that just doesn't happen for a lot of cis perceived women. So I think for me, it's less about the fact that the person is white. I think white people should be speaking up, period, right? Because they're a part of the non oppressed group. However, I think when it comes to like whose responsibility is it to like speak up in male spaces, I would charge trans men of any identity, of any racial identity to be able to take that on. I don't want to say, oh, like it's just white trans men who need to be using their privilege to speak up against things. I think if it comes to patriarchal conversations, gender differences, conversations where you can interject and recognize that like because you are AFAB, that means that you have a different level of consciousness that like cis men will never have, that it is your responsibility to at least hold space for the community that you were assigned to. And I think that, you know, it's hard because the world ain't safe for trans people, period. You know, I think that, you know, trans women experience a lot more violence, a lot more higher rates of murder and discrimination. And like the issue with that is like, y'all think that like people would be undergoing this level of losing privilege if it wasn't what they really felt that they were? You know what I mean? So I think like it's a layered and complex conversation. I think that trans masculine folks might be towing a really difficult line of recognizing how much power they actually have. You know, I think that, you know, it's unfamiliar to be taken seriously if you've spent so much of your life being ignored and not respected. But I think once you get to step into that, if you do have the power to blend, I know some people don't like passing. I think some people don't like being aligned with cis men. But I think if you do have the ability in today's society where a male perspective is somehow more valuable, that, you know, it is your responsibility to at least interject in the bullshit. You know, if somebody is saying some nonsense that you could just easily shut down, do that. You know, you have the power to be able to do that. I think if there is a situation where disclosing your gender identity would put you at risk, like safety wise, obviously do it feel safe, you know, but depending on which rooms you're even given access to, you know, those might be spaces that a non-binary person, a cis woman, a trans woman may never have the opportunity to speak in. So at least knowing that you're holding it down for other members of your community, if that feels cookie worthy, you know.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel that, and I mean, like I said, when you had pointed it out to me, it was more so myself. I was so concerned about anyone asking the question of whether or not I'm transgender and everything like that, and I feel like that was the main reason why I didn't interject or stand up. But now, and I mean, and it took because like you said, getting comfortable with that sort of power that you have, and you know when you're ignored for so often and you're not necessarily used to that type of to that type of responsibility, that type of power. And now how I see it, I mean, because my everyday life, I now I say something now, especially now that I'm more open and comfortable about it, but even with myself, I have no problem saying something.
Yeah.
And I welcome talking about it because you know they see my beard and they're just like, oh, and you never know. I mean, you never know who you are around, and I feel like that ignorance right there is what really irritates me because then they think that they can just say whatever they want out their mouth. You don't. And you know, also too, I feel like back in the day, I'm not gonna. I like throat punching probably would have been the first thing that I would have wanted to do. So, you know, 10, 15 years ago, I probably shouldn't have even done anything then either. You know, I had to mature into being able to use my words in a way that can make a difference.
Mhm.
And I feel like a lot of people should definitely have the conversation and use their words that can make a difference. representation on television, because I've sent you a couple of podcast episodes, and we were talking about scary movies and stuff. And
Mhm.
do you think? I mean, I like it. I like how there are more representations of individuals in the community being shown on TV, and it should have been happening a long time ago. I do feel like some people forget Queer as Folk was before L Word, the L Word, and so that one was there. Granted, the entire cast was all white. There wasn't really much representation of people of color at all. And I feel like that show there could have definitely done some good things with it. But again, no one was really talking about it. Do you as someone who's non-binary, do you feel that how do you think that representation would increase? Do you feel like it's something that would need to be done like ourselves, like being the creators and the ones that's actually putting it out there? Or do you think cisgendered individuals will allow the opportunity, present the opportunity to the community?
I don't know. I think it's tricky because anytime you're in a position where like you're being allowed to do something, like that's still a very strange power dynamic. You know what I mean? Like this idea that like someone is giving me permission to tell the story. Like I don't need permission to talk about my experience. Like, I don't need permission to talk about some real shit or like my friends or like what we did or like tell a story that like might be different than what is stereotypical. And I think that, it's also complicated because we live in a country that so heavily monitors media that like, I'm curious now, like, how many stories have been cis washed, or like diluted because the people that were funding did not want that message to be going out to their particular audiences. And I think ultimately, like, it's about who's got the money. And I think, the more queer, trans, people of color that are just given money will allow, what needs to come out to come out. There are plenty of trans directors, there are plenty of trans creatives, there are plenty of artists. It's just about who's got the visibility and the money. It's about who's valuing them. So I think, it would be very radical to say, all right, well, we just need to throw the whole thing away and start from a situation where like people who need money are getting money to do what they want to do with it, and like allow what comes out of that to naturally and organically develop. Because right now the shit that we're seeing is all propaganda. You know what I mean? It's all for this agenda, and like it sucks. Like years later, finding out, oh, like this is what really happened, or this is what was really going on. Like this is one of the reasons why I think TikTok is so innovative. Like we are seeing people's firsthand stories. Like we're seeing like firsthand accounts, primary sources, and like not to say that like you shouldn't still check your references or do background or follow up and do research, but like people need to be able to just say what they want out of their mouth without other hands that have, ulterior motives being involved. And,
Yeah.
it's going to require a dismantling of the capitalist system. It's going to require some people moving out of the way. It's going to require some people telling less of their stories, or at least getting less visibility, because people seem to think there's only so many screens in a movie theater. You know what I mean? All right, well, how about we have, some of these screens dedicated to people who also have things to say. I think that there's just been such a long history of these stories being silenced. It's not that they're not happening, it's just we don't have access to seeing them. So I don't like I don't like having to beg for handouts. And also I recognize that the society we currently live in, people who have positions of power are the ones who are making these decisions. So, it's about towing both lines and recognizing, all right, well, if I want to appeal to a funder, what am I going to tell them that will make them feel good about contributing to my success, while also recognizing that I'm not going to let them alter my message.
Hmm. I would love to sit there and be the bank for all that stuff. I would love to make that a possibility. And how do we get people comfortable? Because I feel like what it is, the reason why why they want to censor it, obviously, is because they're uncomfortable. They can't handle the message that's being put out there, and how do we get them comfortable? Grant, like you said, that's not necessarily our job, but I feel like for the ones who want to sort of do something about it, but they're not exactly sure how to or what level that they can handle to be an ally and want to be a part of the change and do that. How do we, as individuals in the community, how do we gradually, baby them into this?
Okay. Well, I often like to make the distinction when I'm having conversations around comfort, especially because I came across one of these documents that was talking about the culture of white supremacy. Like there were like 14 different things. Don't quote me on the number, but it was around that amount of qualities that like reinforce white supremacist culture. And one of them was leaning on comfort. And I think for a long time, mind you, my personal philosophy, I love being personally comfortable. I love a nice soft blanket, a nice warm, room. We're not talking about sensual comforts. You know what I mean? We're talking about energetic comfort. We're talking about what is required to allow abundance to exist for everyone and like liberation to exist for everyone. I saw a quote with Kwame Ture that he was talking about, a lot of the times white people have this agenda about peace. And it's like, there is no peace when there are people that are suffering. You might have peace. You might be comfortable, right? But over here, everybody's having a hard time, and that is at the expense of your peace. So I think, there's a difference between being uncomfortable and being unsafe. And I think there's a lot of conflation that happens when, people of privilege need to acknowledge that they have privilege because it makes them feel like they are not acknowledging their challenges. And I think that it is possible to acknowledge that you have a hard time or that you had a hard experience or that you had a struggle while also holding space for that it will never amount to the same amount of struggle that someone who is in this oppressed group might feel. So like I don't think my goal is to make people comfortable. I think that, inviting them, say, hey y'all, this work is going to be uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable, vulnerable.
Right?
It's very uncomfortable to apologize for something that you felt like you thought was helpful. It's very uncomfortable to be accountable. It's very uncomfortable to name that you were wrong and to move out of someone's way. So like, I'm not saying it's gonna be easy. We're not here to be like, oh, have this nice chair and we can applaud you for like doing the right thing. No, sometimes doing the right thing is extremely uncomfortable. There are people who throughout history, white people, who I want to give credit for helping people of color, for standing on the front lines, for harboring people who needed safety, fugitives, because white supremacy said that the people that they were helping were criminals. And the reality is like, it's all relative. The people who are running our governments are determining who a criminal is, and they just decide arbitrarily, oh, we don't like this, so we're gonna make it against the law. We don't like black people, so we're gonna make them being free against the law. Like, come on. It doesn't make any sense. So for me, yes, it's very uncomfortable to stand up against the powers that be when they're not making no fucking sense. It's scary. It's extremely scary. But brave people do it. Courageous people do it. Honorable people do it. And noble people do it. And if you want to consider yourself one of those people, it's time to do a little bit of work. Like you got to move. Like you have to hop into action. And I think, obviously in the moment is a lot harder to do than like when you're looking at the history books and saying, oh, I would have did that. Like I would have been on that side. But like, as you see today, like there is multiple forms of oppression that are happening, multiple genocides that are happening. And the people who are speaking up about it are the people who would be speaking up back then, not the people who are trying to talk about how things are complicated and, it's very hard and there's nuance. There's no nuance about harm, in my opinion. Like, I think that for me, morally, like if you get presented with a certain set of facts and you still want to try and rationalize your way out of not doing something when you have the capacity to, you sleep. Like you're absolutely asleep. And like I don't have time to try waking somebody up who is determined to look the other way. You know what I mean? Like obviously, like, all right, you don't want to be here, you know, like, and I get it. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's very hard. People are going through a lot of levels of mental health struggles and stresses right now. And like for some people, they do not have the mental bandwidth that it requires to like show up. But you know, those are not people that I give my attention to.
I love that. Your energy about it all. Cause I mean, I was for a time I had to sit here and think like, but this was more so just listening to what other white people were sitting there saying because I needed to be gentle about certain things. But it's just like you see what's going on. Why do I gotta be gentle about stuff that's a struggle that's happening to me? You know what I'm saying? Like you not being offensive, but you want me to be gentle when I'm talking. Like you want me to be gentle when I'm expressing how black people don't get the certain representation they need. They don't like all these struggles, but you want me to be gentle talking to you about it. And you know, it's because then you get that. I was having a conversation. You know, you get angry that labeled as that angry black person, that angry black person narrative, and it's like fucking come on, like seriously, like it's you're right. We don't need to sit here and make them comfortable. And I'm 100% agreed with you. I 100% agree with that. I think the only reason why, you know, why I say for myself why I'm trying to be gentle about things, you know, because as a black man, it's black men are still instantly seen as a threat. And you know, as a black man, I need to. If I feel like if I am going to have a conversation or relay a certain type of message, I do, especially in certain spaces, it's probably best that I figure out how to be a little gentle, you know, help them with their comfort. But I mean, my first, and I don't want to do that, and don't nobody give a fuck to help me feel comfortable. So why the hell should I care about making you feel comfortable? Doing anything to help with your uncomfortability when it's me in the situation that's having to deal with it and the one that's uncomfortable. So I agree with you with that 100%. Do you think that you know, regarding comfortable situations and spaces, the workforce, do you think any of that has at all? No, it hasn't. The workforce.
I told you, I literally said, I said, some of these questions, like, we already know the answer to. Like, you know, we don't need to go around like whether it's a yes or it's a definite clear answer. You can't
Yeah.
spin it away that like it's not gonna be fucked up. So I'm not ask me a question, ask me a direct yes or no question, you're gonna get a direct yes or no answer, and that'll be that. Like we can unpack it if you'd like, but like there's probably not going to be room for the other side from me, you know.
And so I was talking with someone, and so they were telling me about how the position that they're in, they know it's because of making that quota for having a black person on their roster or you know on the thing, and it sucks to have to it sucks for us in our community to have these conversations. You know what I'm saying? Like it's you don't necessarily get to hear the right conversation. Oh man, I got this banging job, or not as often. You know what I'm saying? Did this banging job because of my talents and abilities, not because I got to sit here and meet a quota for the amount of black people that they're supposed to hire. You know, it's unfortunate that and I mean I want to be that optimist that believes, you know, maybe in 50 years, it will be different. The tables will have completely turned in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, when more white people step up in those spaces and allow for us to enter those spaces and, you know, allow for those who are not represented to have some type of representation, especially in this capitalist society with have more of those people on the board, it's a possibility that you know that entire dynamic will change. I look forward to that. And I mean, I've had so many jobs where I would instantly look and see how many black people were employed, and then now I would know if whether or not I was hired because of you know my resume or the fact that I could actually do the job, or if they needed to meet their quota because they didn't have enough minorities in employment, and you know they had to hit a certain number. what was it? It was in the Colin Kaepernick show talking about the white man stamp, and it had me thinking. Even excuse me, myself, I for a second, for some time, being that token black guy in that group, knew it felt good because I had that white man stamp. So if I was going someplace, I knew I had a white guy in my pocket that I can sit there and use for get a reference to sit here and get ahead and do all of this. And it's just like, man, I mean, I'm realizing I've lived my life in it. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's tons of black people who do it, but having to learn how to maneuver in a white man's world in order just for us to be able to make it and get by. Like we spend our entire life having to figure that out instead of necessarily dealing, being ourselves, so it's like being transgender and still trying to figure that out. But now, I got to figure out how to be transgender in a white man's world and how to live in order to even make sure I can survive because, I'm also black. So also got that going against me as well. So now I got to figure out how to do the both for my happiness in order to survive, in order to find my happiness in a white man's world to, you know, live my best life. And now I'm when having the conversations, I welcome having the uncomfortable conversations, but I'm with you right there. Whereas I'm not here to make anybody else feel comfortable. I don't want to make anybody else feel comfortable
And
because
I think
there's
it's important to recognize like we don't have the power to control someone's emotions. You know what I mean? Like people need to be responsible for their own emotions. And I think that in some spaces, your very presence could make someone uncomfortable. You black. So you go somewhere and someone notices that you're black, they could be uncomfortable. You could walk down the street, someone notices that you're black, they could grab their purse a little closer to them. Like it's like I don't have no control over that. You don't know what my intentions are. You don't know what I'm capable of doing. You don't know how kind I could be. You don't know any of those things. So like it's really important for people to be accountable for like their own biases and their own triggers because at the end of the day, like it is not for me to be responsible for your inner experience to my existence. I'm allowed to just exist, you know?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the times we just take all of this extra emotional labor because we see how people have responded. But like even hearing you talk about the trope about angry black people, like that is a tactic they have used to control us. How many angry people have gone up in a school and shot it up in the last year, even? And how many of those people have been black?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When those people are acting the way that they're acting, which is obviously out of, some kind of frustration, some kind of anger, some kind of mental unrest, they get labeled as mentally ill. Or like, they needed help, they needed more support. Why don't we think that about anybody else who's mad, who hasn't murdered other children? You know what I mean? Like it's like I don't have time for the rationalization and like this labeling based on our perceptions of how somebody else should be regulating their emotions. A black person who's not mad in this country is asleep. You know what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
rich, filthy, stinking rich. Like there's not an option. Like there's no middle ground, in my opinion. Like to be,
Yeah.
this is who is this? I feel like it was what is his name? James Baldwin. To be a
Mm-hmm.
Negro in this country and to be even a smidge conscious it's to be in a state of anger all the time. This is
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's no fucking sense. It makes no sense. So like I lean very heavily into like, finding joy in like Afro surrealism. I've seen like, some of the work of like Childish Gambino and Jordan Peele, folks that are like pushing the edge because it's like living the life of a black person is ludicrous enough. We gotta make this shit even crazier. Like we gotta go off the edge because if I just tell you the way I'm living, you're gonna be like, no way. That can't and like black people are not gonna bat an eye at it. They're like, yeah, no, that happened. Where's the new info? So I think, yeah, like black people, because of their positionality, especially in the United States, that's what I can speak on, are put in a position to constantly innovate, to constantly overcreate, to constantly access their souls because they don't have a choice. Y'all have not given us a choice. Y'all give us scraps. We make those delicious. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Y'all give us the shittiest place to live, and we make it popping. Like, who is not trying to be like, And obviously
Yep.
there are some concessions. There's crime rates, there's lack of safety, but that's not inherently black. That is what happens when you take resources from people and then make them fight over them. That doesn't make any sense. That would happen anywhere that people don't have the resources that they need to thrive.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I was I was having a conversation with my sister-in-law, because we constantly have the conversation about the angry black person narrative, and I try to tell her, like, when I have conversations like this, especially with white people, I've numerous times I've been perceived to be angry, but it's like, I'm not angry. I'm passionate about what I'm talking about, and to label me as such, then that's when I'm angry. Like, because you've put me in that position to make me angry because you've created that. And now I'm mad about the space that you've created, because initially the space that I've entered, that I thought I was in, was a space where I felt like I can talk about this, but apparently not, because they made you uncomfortable. And so now you decided to project your uncomfortability about it, and label me as the angry black man, instead of dealing with why you're uncomfortable.
Right.
Why, like like you're saying, I shouldn't have to lessen my emotions for someone else's comfort because they can't handle really seeing everything that's going on. And I agree. If you are black in America, there's no way you can't be angry about what's going on, right? And that the whole world wants to be ran by it. Do you so with the corporations and businesses and so forth? I mean, I feel like I might know what you're going to say regarding this. The ones who proudly put up the flag. Um, it's. Do you think they're doing it as true allies, or do you think it's just a way to get more money in their pocket, because they do realize that there are a lot more of us out there than people like to think, and so they're doing it as more of just a business tactic than actual true allyship.
Right. I feel like I can answer that question with another question in saying, do you think that there are people that keep their Christmas trees up all year?
Yeah, I
Those
do.
people that give a real fuck about Christmas. You know what I mean? Like, I can't get behind an organization or a corporation that like is very habitual around celebrating and acknowledging pride, because in the same way, Black History Month, I'm black all the time. Like, if we're going to treat it like a holiday, which the United States likes to capitalize off of, then I
Mhm.
understand why people want to invest. However, real investment in people with these identities occurs more than just around pride, like, it's not like, oh, it's June or July, whatever month, the region might be acknowledging it. I don't think that like it's easy to accept that as genuine if this is the only time I'm seeing a flag in y'all space. You know what I'm saying? Like, if this is the only time that you're asking people's pronouns, if this is the only time that like you're speaking up against oppression and discriminatory and microaggressions, like you gotta live it. Like a rainbow flag is not enough these days. And I think like for me, um, it's very obvious that places that want to make money are going to appeal to the people with money. And like, I think that it's easy to try and reach a particular audience when something is trending. So if it is a popular time of year, that's when they're going to invest in it. If that's the time to get on the wave. I mean, I didn't even go to business school and I know that. You know what I mean? Like, people are going to do what's hot right now. So like, let's see. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of stuff that's been turning the tides But like, let's see how much these people would be willing to speak up for LGBTQ rights if they had nothing to gain. You know what I mean? Like, if you weren't selling something, if you weren't trying to be a sponsor, if you weren't trying to get your name out there, how many places are willing to just invest without their logo? You know, like, does anybody need to know? And if they have to know, then it begs the question about why is it that you're doing this? For visibility? I'm not impressed by that.
I love how you just respond to stuff. Oh man. Talking about you said something about or well, briefly talking on rights about rights and so forth. I had put the statistic in the email that I sent to you. Did you know that? Like, did you know about those numbers? Because I was actually pretty. Huh?
Which statistic? Share it for the
The
listeners.
No, you're right. The one about the laws, the anti LGBT laws. It was like over 500, about 520 or 550 or something like that, and then 220 directly towards trans and gender nonconforming individuals. Um, did you know that many? Because apparently it's a record, the most that's been passed in the most that's been passed ever in a year.
I
72.
haven't privy to exact figures, but I do have a lot of networks that are working in human rights, folks that are at the ACLU, folks who, are navigating LGBT legal nonprofits and hoping to be able to support folks that are going through that level of institutional oppression. For me, my respect for the government, it just dwindles. I don't know what's left at this point. Like, I don't, I'm not sure that for me that I have a lot of fear, personal fear. I think that when it comes to like institutional implementation of things and people not being able to like sue or like hold people accountable or like get real justice, that is scary. And at the same time, when was this country ever safe for trans people? When was this country ever safe for Black people? When did this country ever respect or support women and children? So, like, for me, it's like, yeah, it's unfortunate that, like, we still have people in positions of power to even be proposing stuff like this. Why do people allow folks who have these ideas to be representatives of constituents that they care to harm? I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
bigger concern. The issue is not the bills for me. It's the fact that like there are people with these beliefs. These people need help. You know what I mean? Like these people need education. These people need to have their beliefs obliterated. These people need an ego death. And like for me, I feel like that's a better way of getting to the source of the issue than like be fighting in court about whether or not my humanity is due. Like we all know that I'm allowed to live. I should be allowed to live. I should be allowed to go to the bathroom when I want to go to the bathroom. I should be allowed to play a sport that I enjoy. Like these are stupid. This is a stupid distraction. It's a distraction so that people can get really riled up about what they think they're losing that they never even had in the first place. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
when could you do that? You know what I mean? Why are you mad that somebody is proposing this and instead not trying to get these people out of their jobs? Like they just should not have this power at all. These are the people that need to be fired. These are the people whose bosses you need to be going to saying, "Hey, I don't know if I don't want to like point fingers. I don't want to assume that you're transphobic or that you're not supportive of children or that you are a racist, but as their supervisor, you might have a responsibility to ensure that they're adhering to human rights. This is a public serving position. So I'm just confused which public they think that they're serving. And I think posing it that way and allowing people to like really see how stupid they look, like, why are you mad? You're mad that you can't see my genitals? I didn't report people's genitals. I'm not interested in genitals. It's like, bro, like stuff like, come on, the business. Because at the end of the day, these are the victims of the violence. These are the people who are being harmed the most. Your mind is so frail that you can't share space with a human being who you're perceiving as different than you. The only thing that's different is your fucked up thought process.
Yep, that part. That part right there. It's so wild. No, it's not wild, but what's wild is, like you said, the fact that they are still in power. I mean, 'cause I feel like they should have. I don't want to be morbid and say they all should have died off by now, but I feel like that should have been the case. But then I guess it goes back into all this hate and all this, that mindset and way of thinking is taught. It's continuously taught from generation to generation, and it all just needs to stop. Just blow it all the hell up. That way of thinking just needs to be just completely just stopped. Just
I think it
yeah.
needs to be deconstructed. I think it needs to be deconstructed because ultimately, like, there was a quote that I said that, like, when you're changing someone's reality, that can be a very, like we said, it's a very uncomfortable, it could be a painful process for them. Like, if you live your whole life thinking that you're right about something and then you find out you're wrong, that's hard to sit with. However, if you are in charge of other people and you don't operate in a way that is supportive of the people that you claim that you're supposed to be protecting, just get out the way. I agree. For a while I used to say, well, a lot of people they're old, they're gonna die out, and like I had a relative that actually like called me ageist for that perspective, like this idea that like because I think that people who are old have outdated views, like that's where y'all got y'all views from the past, and like
Yeah.
unless you're listening to young people, I don't see a way that that would change. But I see incremental steps towards a higher consciousness. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'm going to be alive in the lifetime where white supremacy is completely obliterated. But this shit is not sustainable. I'm not worried about it ruining the planet. Humanity might not be here, but like the earth is going to be okay. The earth is regenerative. We are the ones getting in the way. So like I think, either people who care about longevity, which are not often capitalists. Capitalists are not here for the long game. They are here for profits that can be made immediately and as swiftly and as exploitatively as possible. We're not here to sustain human life if you're interested in making lots of money, But I personally feel like I'm not I don't have the emotional bandwidth. I don't have the emotional bandwidth to be fighting systems as an individual. And I think, that's the reclusion that I have accepted for myself. I think that there are absolutely ways that I contribute to the fight. Being an educator, talking about sex education, supporting young people, spreading that word. But like, you will never catch me at a protest. I'm Black. I'm not safe. You know what I mean? So like for me, like I figure out where I can fit in. And I also have very clear boundaries about where I'm not going to do certain things. So for me, like knowing, okay, we live in a country with a system that is designed to be difficult to understand. Who are going to be the law majors? Who are going to be the politicians that deconstruct this shit? Who are going to be the app developers that make some stuff that like civilians can get access to properly communicate how to vote in their locales in a way that will remove these people from power? Because at this point, the way that I have seen so many, I'm not gonna say regular, average Americans be furious at the people who they elected to lead them. Like there's gonna be some kind of change soon, and we've seen waves of change. So like I'm not worried about the change, but at the same time I'm very concerned for these people with these mindsets, just because it's like you can feel that way, right? But like institutionally versus individually, it has a much different impact. I don't care if somebody racist walks by me on the street and they can't do anything to impact, where I live, the water I drink, the resources I have access to. You have no power. You know what I mean? It's people who are in positions of power that need to be removed, and people in positions of powers that need to be educated. And those people that, if they cannot do their jobs well, need to get out of the way.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. And you said you do your part as a sex educator, educating with the youth, and I how do we bridge the gap to for that? So I mean, and I'm guessing you do your part to educate those who aren't necessarily familiar with the specific of what you're talking about, correct? With so how do individuals figure out how they can bridge the gap, how they can contribute without sitting there being on the front lines and doing the protests? Because you're right, protesting is not safe for Black people. I did do it. I did do it, and I didn't mind doing it. But it was that I was definitely concerned when I did it. I was concerned.
There's
Um,
risk.
but
And I'm
I
not saying that any person who is Black shouldn't go protest. If that's what you feel like you have your capacity to do, if you are willing to get arrested or willing to be, tear gas, if you're willing to put yourself on the front lines for folks that you feel have less privilege than you do, go for it. But at the same time, there are people with more privilege than I have, and those are the people that feel like they can go to those spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. You just got to find the right ones who will, like you said, do it on behalf of those who don't have those privileges to do
Yeah.
that. But no, yeah. So like Bridget, like because I feel like this is my part. I'm doing my part to try to bridge that gap between transgender, with non-binary, transgender, but then people in the community, and then the cisgendered. Having these type of conversations where someone can actually sit there and say, you know what, damn, you're right, and do something about it. And then but then, and if they want to do something about it, how does one figure out? Because even just Black people in general, Black people as a community, we should do more for each other as well, especially for those who are not part of the LGBT community. So
Yeah.
if we can come together, how do we help an individual, or like what does one do to figure out what it is that they can do, and like how do they figure out what it is that they're capable of doing? If they do decide to do something about it.
That's a really great question. And to be honest, like I'm answering it not as a person who is an expert in this. I know what I'm good at, but I don't know what everybody else is good at. And I think that self-awareness about what your skill sets are and like what you do contribute to society is a really important first step. I think that, for folks to put it in perspective, one time I heard about this thing called like a glass ceiling. There's also a glass floor. You know what I mean? Like there are certain things when you think about physical ability, like when you think about speaking English as a first language, when you think about intellectual ability, when you think about employment ability, educational access, there are so many dimensions that like you are doing better than somebody in. You know what I mean? And it's not to say that like, oh, we have to like bolster ourselves up or, look down on other folks, but like there is always going to be an area of oppression that you will never know, that you will never experience. And because of that, it's very important to stay humble. Like I think when it comes to glass floors, figuring out what is the thing that you could bring to someone that they would not have access to had you not given it to them. And I think, depending on where you're at in your life and how privileged you are, like that could just be giving somebody on the street some food, like unhoused folks are abundant in California. And I think that like sometimes people take for granted, like just the ability to, walk and like buy what you need to feed yourself, take a shower, like, and like I said, do what feels good within your realm of safety. But there's tons of nonprofits people can donate to. There's tons of nonprofits you can volunteer at. We are in a post pandemic world where like, okay, like folks are now allowing more people into their spaces again. So like finding a place to volunteer. I think that's the basic thing you could do, because giving your time is valuable. Time is one of the most valuable things that we have. And for people that have the time, that's going to make a bigger impact than you think. I think as you go up a little bit more, considering what you can do in your networks. I think if you know people who know people, then like you are still a degree closer than like somebody who has never met somebody in a position of power at all. So like even being like, hey, like I know you're working at that place, like what opportunities do y'all have for this? Like I would love to be able to share jobs, with folks in my network, I think when you were talking earlier about the complexity of like whether or not you're the token hire or whether you got hired for your skills, at the end of the day, for me, like it's not my responsibility to determine whether or not I'm filling a quota. However, if I am filling a quota, that organization is responsible for making sure that I'm trained with the skills that I need to succeed in my role. And like so often people get hired and they get set up for failure because they don't have the qualifications to be able to execute. And like then they get written up because they were not able to deliver. And I'm like, you didn't even show me how to do this. I was not properly trained on this. So I think investing in upskilling is another really, really big one. So like for people who are in leadership positions, if you have people of color on your teams, people of color who are reporting to you directly, make sure that they get professional development. Make sure that, they are also being invested into, given opportunities to go to conferences, given opportunities to read books, given adequate breaks. Like, it sucks that I even have to say stuff like this because it sounds very basic, but like some of the stuff is not top of mind for everyone. And like people who forget where they came from, sometimes need to be reminded, like, yeah, this would be really helpful, wouldn't it? And like you could help somebody else, or like however it was that you got where you are, because most of the time it's networking and nepotism. Like making sure that you passing on that blessing to somebody else. And I think like it's very crucial if you are a white person or a person of an identity that is historically considered dominant, not to approach it as though you are saving someone, because that also creates another power imbalance. You know what I mean? Like, don't act like you coming out here rescuing people because they're weak. Like, come out and act like you're supporting them. You are their ally. You are their accomplice. You are helping them in a way that, like, they should be entitled to, and these systems are not allowing to come to fruition. So, like, for real, sometimes it's really just standing up and, like, making room for somebody else to sit down. And I think that, coming back to it just being really hard, bridging the gaps, like I put that onus on the people in positions of power. And I think, like I said about the ceiling and the floor, everybody has power to some degree. Everybody has some degree of privilege. And based on whatever your degrees of privilege are, should determine how much effort you're putting into, and that should determine how wide your capacity is. So for people who, are a little younger and like don't really know where to start, try out a bunch of stuff. You never know where you might strike gold, who you might connect with. If you're an introvert, get out there, utilize the tech that is available, utilize social media. TikTok is amazing. Hashtags are working. I think ultimately, like, there's so many different vantage points that like people can try, that like we just don't want to fall into a helpless mindset that just because we live in this trash ass country that there's nothing that we can do to like feel better inside. I think that there is always room to access some kind of joy despite nonsense that is going on around you. There is very real nonsense that is happening in this country, and people doing the best that they can. Give yourself credit for doing the best that you can.
Alrighty. Yeah, you're right. I give myself credit.
I do
No,
too.
you're right. You're right. Pat yourself on the back. Come on, do it. Do it. Do it. Come on, pat yourself on. There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. Alrighty, my dear. Thank you so much, Sloan. This conversation has been amazing as per usual. Do you want to put your shout out your social medias and all that stuff if
Oh,
you want to?
definitely, definitely. I think the best way for people to access me and my work, I have a website. It is nefertarisloan.work, nefertarisloan.work. All of my social media is on there and ways to connect and to see some of the other projects that I've been involved in. So definitely check that out.
Nice, nice. Alrighty. Well, I appreciate it. This has been Transcend Breaking Boundaries. Thank you.
Consider the boundaries broke.
Heck yeah. Bye.